Welcome to a super special Horns Up. I'm Animesh,
And I'm Peter.
and it's super special because we're glad to welcome back Paul Masvidal to Horns Up. Hi, Paul. Glad to have you back.
Hey guys, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Trust me, right? It's so cool to have you back on the podcast, and we have so much to talk about. But let's start off with the basic. How are you doing, and what's keeping you busy these days?
I am doing pretty well, actually. I'm considering, I'm kind of in a different stage of what's been, I feel like, a couple year process, coming out of a lot of grieving and making a record and getting some space. I've been living nomadically for about over a year now, floating around and just staying kind of in different places and just kind of rediscovering, reacquainting myself with my experience and seeing new things. But what I'm doing lately is I'm playing a lot of guitar, which is actually nice. And I'm finding myself interested and invigorated in playing again in a really kind of disciplined way. And it feels really good. It's like coming home. I haven't played like this level of practicing. I can't remember. I mean, other than when I made the album, but it's like a whole other phase for me of how I'm kind of rediscovering the instrument and developing a new kind of intimacy with it. And I think part of what spurred it on was the new model of a Strandberg that was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And also all these plans for next year with the touring and stuff. I just feel like I want to be in a really fluid place with the instrument. And so I'm just kind of putting in the hours and it feels really good. So it's very self-nurturing for me to spend a lot of time with the guitar. It's like, it's really good for my mind and my body.
Absolutely glad to hear that. You spoke of the record, so let's get to that. It's almost going to be a year since Ascension Codes, and for us, both Peter and I, Ascension Codes was really special, so much so that at the end of uh, 2021, when everybody and their like everybody's doing year-end lists, we were very surprised when both uh, our lists ended up being topped as such by Ascension Codes because
Oh, amazing.
yeah, we
Cool.
both ended up loving just how complex and, dare I say, emotional and even trippy at times the album was. So I'm apologizing, but we are going to be spending quite a bit of time with you just nerding about it, just
Oh,
nerding out about it. I hope
thank
that's
you.
okay.
I absolutely no. It's one of those things where I feel like I'm very proud of the record. I think it really captures something new. It's a new chapter in Cynic's kind of trajectory and language, and obviously a new chapter in a lot of different ways. A very cathartic record, but I feel I hadn't listened to it in like, geez, it's been a while. And I was in this Turo, which is like, people rent out their cars. It's like
Mm-hmm.
and you can just rent a car for a day kind of thing. I rented a car the other day because I don't drive otherwise. I don't have a car. And so I had to drive kind of far away and wasn't doing public transportation. And I put the record on and just cranked it up. And I just wanted to hear how it sounded in this sound system, but also just to kind of re-enter it. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it's captures something, it has something to say. It's not, I mean, every record for Cynic is a real moment in time. And this one in particular has a real place in my heart that I don't even know how to quite articulate, but I know that it's in its own timeline, it's in its own dimension, and eventually it'll be promoted because next year is turning into a very focus oriented year because of the 30th
30th
anniversary.
anniversary. Yeah.
But I was just telling, my manager about this, like how I feel like, these records aren't related to like the week it comes out or the month or the year. They have their own like universe they exist in. And if it's years after that we're doing an Ascension Codes tour, that's okay. You know what I mean? Like it's not part of the pop culture timeline, So, and maybe 2020 kind of did that for a lot of artists where they realized the benefit of like, because they made records that got released right then and they couldn't promote it. So it kind of set up this environment where it's not about that urgency of, and I also, for me, like there's a weird thing with artists. You go and make a record, which is extremely intimate environment and alone and or working with the band and very isolating and just internal and private. Like I don't see my friends for months, I'm just like in a complete tunnel vision space of trying to create a container around the album, to really have it be very thorough and just to see the whole vision and show up for it. And then what's really challenging I found is you're expected to just go out and hustle and promote and tour. Like you go from this really like being in a cave meditating space to now being around people and selling your work.
Yeah.
And the record company had even hit me up after I delivered the album saying, okay, we're getting the press lined up and here's the story and da, 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 da. And I was like, no. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, I can't talk. I'm too sensitive. I'm too raw. I can barely do anything right now. This record took everything out of me. I can't just turn into a salesman right now. That doesn't feel genuine to me. That feels cheap, and I understand I want to show up for the album, but I have to show up for it where I have to fill the well again. Do you know what I mean? I can't just like, I just poured everything out and now I'm supposed to go and go sell it. Like, no. So I told them like, I don't want to do any interviews. And they were like, what do you mean? And I was like, just maybe one or two or something. So I was very selective with a few old colleagues I knew, journalists in the business but I also was sensitive because in the wake of the events that happened, I knew that there was a big story. And I didn't want headlines to be about what happened. Like, I don't want the selling point of the album to be the loss of two musicians. I want it to be about the music and the celebration of the work rather than like this thing that happened. But now I'm finding it's finally turning that corner where the dialogue can be approached in a healthy way. And it really took the passage of time to kind of have that happen.
So I have to be honest, like for me, while you spoke about the album process of being in that cocoon, that's how I listened to the album. That's how I wanted. For me, I found the best way to consume the album was just be like in that tunnel vision where I'm not doing anything else. Because that's where each time I listened to it, I picked up a different aspect and I could actually connect with it, which I don't think, coming back to what you said, if I dealt with 2020, I would not have been able to do this in 2021. Let's be honest, right? Like,
I'm glad you're finally saying this, Peter, because
because let's be honest, right? We are not used to not being with anyone. Now, when you're forced to being with someone, I mean, nobody at all, and now you actually, all you're doing is left to your devices and kind of seeing what connects with you, right? And I think that's where I've realized over a period of the last couple of years, I don't want to listen to everything, right? And I totally appreciate you saying that you didn't want to do the interview, because if you did the interview with us, it would have totally come across as inauthentic, or anybody for that matter, right? We would know you're trying to sell it. And I think maybe this is slightly, I don't know, higher intellectual talk, but then when art is being cheapened by just being sold to you, right? And I think as somebody who's been listening to metal for so long and music for so long, when something's inauthentic, right?
Yes.
So I completely understand where you're coming from, and especially like it's hard, right? I mean, just like when I tried to even put myself in your shoes for like even a minute, I was just like, yeah, man, no, you can't do that, right? Like, I think one of the
Yeah.
things we've also learned to appreciate over the last few years is space and giving people space and time. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's important, right?
Yeah. And learning how to give ourselves space to know
Yeah.
Hmm.
when we need it, when rather than, because, I have the tendency, like I like to show up for people and be a reliable person. And so I always hold myself accountable in whichever way, however I'm called. But this was one of those moments where I was like, it almost felt selfish that I had to withdraw, but it was also knowing that this was a matter of life and death for me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I needed to preserve my basic sanity here and maintain some degree of like integrity with what was going on. And so it was, yeah. And, and I'm so glad you guys, because the record, this record, similar to even all Cynic records, but maybe even comparable to Focus, it's a challenging album and it's very dense. And it's like, it's not an easy listen. And this is what I've been told by a lot of intense journalists and hardcore Cynic heads. They're like, you really threw a curveball, because it's like you're really kind of making it hard for us. And I said, in my mind, I'm so swallowed by the cocoon of all the details that I hear it as completely this, I'm just trying to accurately create a realized environment, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I just want the world to be very accurate and real and true. So I just get swallowed by it. And then, it's like almost like you're being a channel for a conduit for a vision and a sound. So it takes a lot of concentration and energy. But I also, I feel like I'm grateful you guys are showing up and saying you get it and you support it, because that doesn't happen. I don't hear that a lot. Like, I mean, I feel like you have a few songs and there's some reaction, but Cynic's music it just doesn't hand you, you know what I mean? It doesn't hand you things in a very obvious and easy
Yeah.
way. It's layered and dense, and there's a lot of complexity going on, and it takes a lot of patience to kind of get in there. And so I appreciate your patience with the work, and I'm curious to hear more about what you guys are, connecting with, because I don't hear this a lot,
So, 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 so if I must, right, and allow me to indulge myself, I think I think Animesh remembers this well, right? Because what
Oh,
happens,
it's that story. Yeah.
it's that story, yes. Because I totally get what you were talking about the sales, right? Because I still remember the moment the first single was out,
Hmm.
and I didn't get it. Like, I'll be honest, right? I didn't get it. I was like, what is going on here, right? Like, what is this album even about? And then I literally had to take a step back and say, like, wait, but I'm only judging this music based on like what I've
Mm-hmm.
heard over a YouTube video, right? That's it.
Yeah.
And you can't really judge a track based on that, which is strange because like when I got the entire album, even when I heard it for the first time, I'm glad that there are others who like me didn't get it, right? It was like, what is really happening in here? And until I actually put myself in that zone where I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do anything else. Like there's no walking, there's no exercise, there's no like keeping it in the background. You need to like kind of,
Pay
and I'm
attention
sorry
to
I'm
it.
using the word focus, but you
Focus.
literally had to do that, right? And that's when it started like connecting with me. And I was like, oh my God. And I think that's one of the things, right? Because like when you look at just the shift, like, can you imagine like one of the songs randomly being posted in a Spotify playlist or what have
Right.
you, right? No one's, it's literally like, it all it takes is like 8 to 10 seconds. You don't figure it out, and then you just go next, 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 next,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you skip through. And I think that's where an album like this really stands out, right? Because it doesn't fit in the boxes of what normally how do you kind of package it or you kind of position it, right? So I think that's one of the things I feel really helped with the album, like just spending time. And
Mm.
I'm just trying to wonder, right? I mean, I'm glad you said it, and I'm glad you're also saying that you don't hear it often, right? Because we're so caught up in what's the next big thing, what's the next quick thing. Like every Friday, what's the new release, right? You don't give
Yes.
it that time or the music the it's due, right?
Hmm.
Especially in
Yeah.
today's like social media driven short attention span world.
Oh, I mean, and I remember a friend telling me this, 8 years ago or something, saying, "Oh, I never listened to a full song. Like literally just goes, like, just jumps around, like you were saying, and just does pieces of music." And I thought, oh no, this is not. And I understand that's a style and a way of, it's fast food approach to art. It's just like get your whatever fix and then move on to the next thing and get your fix. But the type of music, a band like Cynic makes, it's the opposite of that. It's really like, I mean, even a record like Ascension Codes, it's its own language, harmonically and melodically. It's like a different vibration that you have to kind of spend time with to even understand what's going on. It's not obvious, And I remember even with Warren Riker, who mixed it, when I first, I knew, because I basically, he had all these tracks. He heard a few demos, but he went in kind of very raw to mixing the album. And I knew it was going to take a long time before he really got inside the music and understood what was going on. He'd have to listen to them over and over to really understand even what I was going for, like mix wise, because it's such a subtext. It's not an obvious, like, we're going to apply this formula and it's just going to work.
Yeah.
It's like you have to understand the language and then the thing underneath the language. And then it's like, finally, when you kind of get that, you're like, oh, now I can hear it. And once you hear it, I feel like, and I'm always like ahead because I'm the one writing it. So I'm like, a year before you guys in a way, and I felt that way with Focus. I was like, at first I was like, oh my God, this stuff is so cool and catchy and interesting. And then it wasn't till like we realized that we shared it with the world that it was like, whoa, people they don't hear it the same way we hear it, And it took years, I think, before people heard it the same way. So it does. And I think like earning real, art that is earned and requires more patience and to sit with it is more, reflective of who we are, like as a species in a more profound way. Like it's really like, it gets into like a reincarnational aspect of like art rather than just like, cookie cutter turnover pop culture. Like the, in Kabbalah, one of the precepts is like, they say like, and I've just, dabbled in some of that stuff, but one of their things is they say, like that if you go the short path, like trying to do everything ADD or approach things that are just is what leads to suffering. I mean, Buddhism talks about that too. It's like, you have to kind of go the long road, you have to kind of do the work. So it's almost like, it's related to that idea of just like being patient with yourself and spending time with things. But again, we're in a time, this is the culture we're in, and we're in the technology. I mean, look at how quick everything is, how everything is at our fingertips. And if we don't get it right now, we think something's wrong. If someone doesn't respond to your text, immediately, it's like, what's going on? You know what I mean? I like the silence notifications thing. I've been using that a lot lately because it's like, this means that I'm maybe reading your text, but I can't respond right now, because it's gotten to that point where we're so, do you know what I mean? Like enmeshed.
Forever connected. Yeah.
Yeah. And we really have to create space within ourselves with everything. This is the practice, to kind of learn how to, our friend asked me last night, he says, how's your freedom? That was his grant. And I thought, wow. I said, when you asked me that question, I immediately think of internal freedom versus external. He was referencing like nomadic living,
Yeah.
but in
Yeah.
my mind, I was like, actually, internally, my freedom is good right now. I actually feel pretty spacious and open. And that's how I'm going to answer your question rather than,
I'm
and
sorry. I started laughing because the first thing that hit my head right now was, I hope you can see the space in this.
oh yeah, the space for this. Yeah, yeah, I
Oh
know.
my God. We
That's
can do this, I
actually,
think, the entire episode, I think, right?
I mean, that's exactly the same idea,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and we do it for people. You guys are doing it by having a podcast. You hold space for artists. You ask questions. You listen. We interact. We're this is really, it's a beautiful exchange because we're all in this together. We're
Hmm.
trying to kind of hold space for each other and reflect back we're all mirroring each other's, we're all one, right? So it's like we're reflecting back to each other these different aspects of experience, and the art is an aspect of that as well. It plays this interesting other role. It's like, you know what I mean? It's this weird, I mean, I'm fascinated with sound in general, just like, what
Hmm.
is this thing? It's like sound art, you're sculpting sound molecules and create these architectural environments that you can't see, but you can only hear, and it's, I mean, Indian culture and the
Yeah.
ragas go so deep with that, I mean, you guys wrote the whole book on sound. I mean, starting with Om, you know what I mean? Like the whole root of creation, it's like, it's deep stuff.
Okay. So since we are talking sound, I think this is a perfect way to talk about the short pieces that not only introduce and close Ascension Codes, but also act as interludes. I'm calling them the Ascension Codes itself because I really don't know
Yeah.
what else to call them. Are
Yeah.
they?
Yes.
And
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, Rupam Garg. He's the
Yeah.
guitar player. So
yeah,
Yeah.
that's him playing on those. He's like a real brother to me. And,
okay.
and I did like all the sound design stuff around him. And I had a few different friends, my friend Joshua, who actually lives in Singapore, but he spends a lot of time in India, and my friend Amy. I had like these light language chants going on and different kind
Hmm.
of
Mm.
sonic things. But yeah, no, Rupam and I got deep into this idea of like they were the connective tissue for the greater story, and it became like the whispering light language kind of, it's like they're the codes that kind of become the like the web stuff that connects each,
Hmm.
it's like this the thing between each planet, you know what I mean? It's almost like this little sub planet that kind of connects the next planet, which would be the next song. So like, it's very much like part of a huge web, and those are like the connective tissue. And because the music is so dense and the songs are so layered, they become these moments of like going into almost a meditative space where you can just reflect and get some, go just kind of go inward for a minute and get some space, and then you go back into the journey. It's like this moment of pause. So they kind of, but yes, very specifically, they, and it's related to something called the vector codes. It's a whole thing that I've been studying with a certain teacher, and like it's that you spell it VECCA, vecca, and
Okay.
it's there's a whole like language about this, and I don't, I'm very careful to reveal too much. I feel like it's more
Hmm.
interesting for someone listening to bring themselves to it and to have their own experience reflected through it, rather than me literally say it's about this and see a painter talk about their painting. I rarely want them to explain too much. I just say, it's almost just like, let me just feel this without knowing too many details, because it's your journey too. It's your experience, and I don't want to put it in a box and confine it too much. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to give it too much structure. It has a lot already, but let's let it be spacious and let your interpretation also play a role in this experience, because that's is the power of music. It's subjective, it's all this, one person hears a certain song that it makes them sad. Another person hears the same song, it makes them happy. It's so interesting how we're constantly, our experiences subjectively responding to the sound, so I'm careful to kind of get too specific about anything with this stuff, but we'll go further into Ascension Codes, but I like to keep,
Sure,
it's, you know what I mean?
That's a perfectly placed ball which you've kicked softly into a field, and then it's up to us to take that ball and play with it.
There you go.
Completely get that. All right. Let's talk about the instruments. Could you talk to us about using synths as opposed to a live bass? I mean, how did it affect your writing as well as the production? The fact that you had to do it this way or chose to do it this way this time around.
Well, it's, we'll say this, like the only actual synth on the album that's like played by Dave McKay was the bass, the Moog bass stuff, which is like super analog. And then his like a solo he did in the Winged Ones, like in that song. But other than that, like everything else is like more guitar synth based, like, and all that sound design stuff was stuff that I was doing, just using, creating sounds with my own kind of rig at home and stuff. So like, but really like Dave, but it is synth bass, the root of it. But what is your question regarding it? You were saying just why the choice for it, or?
No, I mean, the fact that you didn't have live bass as such, or what everyone considers electric bass to be, right? And you had this new soundscape to play around with. How challenging was it for you as a musician to make sure that it all gets used in the way you intended it to use? And secondly, in terms of production, because now you're not listening to staccato notes as such. You're listening to notes where you can connect the dots by just sliding over one note to the other. So even that level of granularity, which is like it's easy to do on a fretless bass maybe, but not always when you're playing fretted bass. Right?
No, I really thought about that too, because obviously a very signature aspect of Malone's playing was that kind of percussive staccato, those grooves he would do with like the bass muting and stuff. And that's very much Malone's sound. And you can't do that really. You can do like some, with a keyboard, you can do that kind of thing. But what I did know was that Dave McKay is like a monster, like first, like jazz kind of player who's got this insane vocabulary. He was familiar, of course, and respectful of Malone's sound, and even referenced some of the things that he knew he had done and was like his playing and everything. And once I started to hear what he was doing, what Dave was doing on the stuff, I started to realize, okay, if you just close your eyes, you don't know, it just sounds like bass. You just don't know that it doesn't have that signature like pulsing thing that Malone does, that kind of thing, but it's a different kind of groove. It's more like slithery, and it like you were saying, it kind of just like it moves in a more like legato way, right? It's just like slips and slides through everything and is more kind of almost a different kind of melodic approach, really.
Exactly. But it's taking those frequencies, but at the same time painting it's almost like giving your brushes and your colors to a new artist, but still asking them to paint within the lines as such.
Yes. Yeah.
You will get a new picture.
You get a new picture. And he just did such a phenomenal job. I feel like, again, it's like, first off too, on a production level, like the quality of that bass, the Moog, like that analog synth, it holds like a different frequency range than like, for example, mid-rangey fretless bass that Malone played, which was always more upper registery and kind of competing sometimes more with the guitars, you know? It was always very challenging to mix Malone's bass to get the clarity. And you almost have to just make it really loud to get it, because it's in the same realm as a lot of the guitar stuff. But with this stuff, it was like it had its own sub thing that wasn't competing with the guitars it's just kind of in its own realm. So it created an entire new like production environment around a Cynic record, which I thought was very interesting.
It ended up making the record feel a lot more warmer and cozier to me.
Yeah,
to
totally. It is. I mean, it's the warmest, coziest, fuzziest mix we've ever had, because that bass is just so huge and just occupies its own domain in the mix. And so, yeah, it's really, I think it really worked. And it also lent itself to kind of saying, look, you know, the sound of this band is beyond the sum of its parts. I know that we forged an identity as these musicians, but now like here we can still be this thing that's beyond the members. And that's almost how I was like, it's not about the individuals anymore. It's a sound, you know, and it's the sound of, and I was very respectful to, you know, because both Sean's had heard probably half, if not 70% of this material. Even Reinert knew a bunch of these songs from early demos. They had changed a lot because the demos were just like my little home versions that are very crude, but early days. But it's interesting to think that they did have like their ears participated vibrationally with this work. Do you know what I mean? They were connected to it. Malone was even obviously more connected. He worked on some songs very deeply with me for a few years. So there is that connectedness, but I also like to view in some ways, rather than like the identity of the self and who we are. I know that the sound of a band is the sum of its parts, but it's like, I like to imagine that in some ways it's beyond that Cynic holds something that's not even like, I even had this vision. It was funny. I mean, this is so, in some ways, like you could say it's a sabotaging approach, but early on when they were like, are you going to tour the record? I was like, well, I'd like to get like the next level hologram situation to tour the record. Like, so I'm not there, or just like find some sick new school, you know, collection of musicians that can do it better than we ever did, and just present the work and have it embody the heart of Cynic. And maybe I would just introduce the project. And I'm like the music director, but I don't have to be there. And it was a way of like extricating myself, the personality. Do you know what I mean? Because that's how it feels to me. Like it's so personal and yet so impersonal, because it's more of just showing up for a process rather than like, this is me and my songs and my work and my story. Do you know, it feels very much like a frequency that I tune into, and then I just like grab my guitar and it's like, oh, okay, I can play this, you know, here's the sound, you know, and I feel like it's accessible to other people, you know, I mean, people can tune into the bandwidth you guys did by even getting the record, you know, you got into this.
So the thing is, right, like, while you're saying this, I've actually spoken to other musicians who've exactly described the process of writing music like that, right? It's like literally you're tuning into that frequency. You're just there at the right time. So it's just kind of like how you've described it. And I want to definitely touch on another aspect. Like I said earlier, right? One of the things that didn't connect with me initially with the album was the vocals, until I actually spent that time zoned in, and I truly appreciated it, not as just like one separate instrument, but just the way it was as part of the entire soundscape, so to say, right?
Yes.
And there were so many different layers in there. And I think unpeeling that onion was the key for me, right? Like you've got the clean vocals that you do, you've got the vocoder also in there, you've got Max Feld who I like how is credited as Reptilian Collective
Yeah.
on the album. You've got Anita, who's again with the voice code activations.
Yes.
I mean, I know you've kind of touched upon this, but could you like go a bit further into just how you got the vocals as an aspect, right? Because to me, honestly, like while it is cliche to say vocal as an instrument, I think this is a great example of just how,
Yeah.
because if you think about the traditional metal mix, right, it's always like you've got the vocals and the guitars always kind of like fighting, and then the
Right.
drum somewhere there, and then the bass is like, oh yeah, we need this other instrument also to be part of it, right? But this was
Yeah.
so different. Animation is laughing, it's true.
I know. I
Yeah.
mean, it's unfortunate. I feel like there's been bands that pioneered bass, and we were one of them,
Yeah.
obviously.
Hmm.
But really historically in metal, I mean, and this goes back to Metallica, but even like, if you listen to like, I feel like obviously Master of Puppets, that was a really like a moment for Cliff Burton to be heard, like Orion and stuff, like very melodic, and those like, and what was it, Call of Cthulhu? I mean, you see songs where it was like you felt like you heard the voice of the bass player in a metal band, which was because traditionally in metal bands, it's like bass just is doing what the guitars are doing an octave lower. And I think that's very much a Megadeth approach. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, just like, it's like, don't stray from the guitar riff. And our attitude was always like, wait, the bass is an independent instrument. It needs to just have its, I mean, it's the gravity of and it's the rhythm section. So when you have a real great drummer and a great bass player, they're creating their entire world, it's like a whole other structure around what's happening on top, which is the guitars and vocals. But at the end of the day, when I say on top, I mean frequency wise, not volume wise. Like, they're all equal players. And this is something that was always been challenging in a mix environment, is like, because we were always just like, everything needs to be heard, and we want absolute clarity with all of the instruments. There's no lead singer. Do you know what I mean? There's not.
Yeah.
And so Ascension Codes, especially, I personally, and I think it's just because I come at vocals not as a lead singer, but as a guitar player that happens to sing. It's like I approach vocal parts more like a guitar player, and it's just more like it's an extension of my body and the guitar, rather than like lead singer, my vocals and my melodies. And no, it's like, it's more just like this other instrument that's very, and especially in the evolution of Cynic, it's become more, especially on Ascension Codes, I'd say it's more subtle and subdued and ethereal.
Mm.
And even like the use of the growls, the vocoder stuff, I mean, the reptilian collective stuff that Max was doing. Like, I had told Max, I was like, this is not like a featured thing. You're going to be like this very subtle thing that's kind of in the mix. And the way that Warren, for example, had mixed that stuff was that it's always moving in your head, the panning. So if you listen, that's what's happening with the whole album, the mix, especially the vocals, but a lot of the instruments, the panning is doing this constantly. So this is why when you listen to the album over and over, it's like suddenly you hear this part that you didn't hear before, because it's suddenly popping out of your right ear, but it's always been there, but you didn't notice it because you were a little more focused on the left or the back of your head or what's in front. And so there's always this kind of circular movement happening with all the panning, and the Max vocals were doing that a lot. It's like, if you focus on them, they actually can seem very present at times. But if you don't, they almost seem buried, right? It just depends on where you put your attention. And I was telling Max, I'm calling it holographic growls, because it's like, it depends on your perception of your ears as to how much they come to the forefront or not, like how your eyes would see a hologram or something, But yeah, the vocals, it was really delicate. I went very kind of more old school with the vocoder. A lot of it is keyboard vocoder. Like, I'm literally singing and playing the notes that way. But then I always had a dry vocal in the mix. So I was blending kind of my singing voice, just enough for like some clarity, in the enunciation with the words. but sometimes I didn't even want things to be enunciated. It's more of just like a vibe, you know, and it's not about like understanding the lyrics. It's more of this feeling. And it's almost like this weird ethereal spirit being. And to me, the voices become this kind of collective. It's not like, again, one person singing. There's a few moments that are pretty naked on the record, but a lot of it is just this like, and I'll tell you what it's related to. In my meditation practice, you know, there's these embodiment practices that are very well known in Buddhist practice, which I've learned over the years, where you visualize, for example, like the embodiment of, you know, a being that you admire their qualities or that you respect or that your heart is open to, like a Buddha type figure. And you visualize them, for example, sitting in front of you, and you absorb their qualities. You visualize like literally their energy coming into your body, and you absorb all of that, and then you actually send it back out, and you let it extinguish, like it doesn't, so you just get the emanation of the energy, but you embody it and release it. And my practice has gone to where I visualize a collective, and it's a collective of a lot of almost like extraterrestrial beings that are like parental figures. And this is a way of like, it's like these beings that are very like, they're like my guides, you could say. And in some ways, like those vocals became this embodiment of these, like this collective of extraterrestrials, and they have different aspects. Some are more, you know, feminine, more masculine. Some are these androgynous creatures. But it's like this whole embodiment of beings, you know, and a collective so that's how I kind of saw it, as like this sea of like different entities that were expressing something. So Warren, it took a minute for Warren to get that. But thankfully Warren has very much understood my ideas. Like, I prefer a vocal that's a little underneath than on top. In the context of Cynic. I mean, Eon spoke different, all those other projects, but for Cynic, it's more of this subtext vocal. It's not, again, it's more part of the landscape of the sound, and it's not a featured thing, you know? So yeah, that's really, I don't know if I answered your question, but I tried, you know.
But I think that the part where you said the lead singer kind of answered my entire question, because it's a totally different approach, right? And like what I also understood is why there were so many voices in there, right? And so it kind of cleared that up. It's not supposed to be one. And I think that, especially when you talked about Cynic not just being you or the band members, I think that
it's like it's the collective feeling, right? Of this, like, and, you know, and by the way, we're releasing Ascension Codes instrumentals, you know, just like, wait till you hear what happens when you listen to that album without vocals. I mean, it's completely changes shape. And what's interesting is you start to hear so many things come forward that you wouldn't hear because of the vocals occupying a certain space. And it's a lot of all the guitar layers, because it's so dense with guitar. It's the most dense Cynic album I've, you know, like done guitar wise. It's just packed. I mean, like, it was funny because Warren went from mixing Ascension Codes to Focus, and he was like, God, Focus is so simple. Like, to him, well, it's just because it's always two guitars, you know, maybe like a third thing, but it's really just like left and right guitars, to where Ascension Codes is like a symphony of guitars. And there's so many subtle things. But now with the instrumental, you'll hear it actually, which is interesting. You hear how the album works as an instrumental album, because it's like, holy cow, this album is packed with no vocals, you know, like it's extremely dense. And I actually, because we did this where we did this whole thing of making the non-vocal versions. Warren did that. And I just really enjoyed listening to it as a guitar player. It was like, oh, cool. Yeah, I forgot about that part, you know, like I forgot about all these little textures that just got lost because it's competing with the vocal territory, you know. But so it's interesting. I think it'll be interesting, and it kind of like shows that the music kind of holds up even just as a space without vocals, without the words. It's just this like sonic, you know, kind of crazy dense guitar landscape,
Yeah,
but
it
with the
is.
bass and drums doing their thing too.
I'm selfishly also going to try and use it as just a way to sing along to stuff, because
Yeah.
what's weird is like I knew about the instrumental release, but I didn't know that you'd already recorded a guitar playthrough of Aurora.
Yeah.
And I happened to see that a couple of days ago. And while watching you play, the only thing that I could remember were the lyrics and the way you sing them, because boy, that song is it really I think to me it's the strongest vocal performance
Yeah,
of
for
the entire
sure.
album.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the heart song of the
yeah,
album for sure.
it
It's like
is. It's definitely the yeah,
yeah.
definitely touched me and has helped me a lot too. Uh, anyways, another aspect that Peter and I wanted to talk to you about was the fabulous roster of guest musicians who collaborated and brought this project to life.
You already spoke about Rupam, right? And I'm very curious to know just how you got everyone else. I mean, we spoke about Pliny, so you had Pliny on guitars also. You had Max in there. You had Anita adding there, and literally you spoke about the collective. But how did you go about like selecting who would be part of this collective, right? Because like as part,
Yeah.
like you described your role as the music director, it's not
Mm-hmm.
easy, right?
Right. I mean, I will say this, like historically, Cynic never had guests, like
Hmm.
if you look at our back records, other than like Amy, on like Carbon Based Anatomy and Traced in Air, like it's kind of been just always just the core band. And at the root of Ascension Codes, it is like a trio really of just like there's just the rhythm section, Matt, Dave and me, right? But then there's all these other people. And I went to people that I think I was connected to through my grieving process. So I felt like a real connection to them as like fellow artists and musicians and friends. And I thought these people feel safe. They feel supportive and they understand what's going on. And they also resonate with this work. So it was like, there's even my friend, Michael Devin, who's a bass player, monster bass player, but he ended up doing like the crystal bowls, which are very subtly
Mm.
tucked into a lot of the Rupam, like the codes, like he's in there. These like, it's almost blends with Rupam's harmonic stuff. It's really trippy, but but it was everybody who was like, a lot of them, I went to people that felt safe and I was close to and understood like the context of what was going on. I didn't want to just go to random players because of their names. I wanted to
Hmm.
go to people that felt like friends that understand and I trust and are going through this with me, and Joshua Leon, he's a hardcore yogi. He's a real spirit brother. He has a podcast as well. He's like, he's a real just deep spirit brother on the path. And he's been there, for me for a while. And I remember we had these long talks about like, the chants and the things that we wanted to do in the interstitial stuff. And Pliny, I've always keep in touch with him. He's like a brother to me. And, I thought about, even other people, but I just ended up it fell into place, Amy, and Rita was somebody who I've been like following her teachings. She's somebody who channels a collective of extraterrestrials. She has this whole like collective thing that's just incredible. And her work is so deep and beautiful. If you really listen to her like guided meditations and really
Mm-hmm.
spend time listening to them, her name's Enrita Melchizedek. It's so beautiful and so profound, and it's hard not to just get swept up in the beauty of her voice and her energy. But if you just listen to the words, it's like this deep poetic kind of entrancing meditative space that's so profound and so deep. And she's just an incredible being of light. And so I've been like following her courses and downloaded programs and done workshops. And then I messaged her and I would like, literally, it was just like, I didn't know what kind of response I said I would get. You know what I mean? Cause I don't know. She lives in South Africa and I've never met her. And she was like so gracious and said, of course, my beloved, you can use my voice, on these things and da, 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 da. And I was like, it was just like, it made everything for me because it became the bookends to the album. She opens and closes the album. She's actually woven in as well in a very subtle and abstract way, but she's very featured as like the big opening and closing. She starts the journey and then ends the journey for us. And to me, she's the mother, she's the cosmic mother of the album, So she holds a very kind of holy space to me of like, almost like the mother ET or something, the mother extraterrestrial or Martian mother, But yeah, so it was really organic. That's really how everybody appeared, and it was just going to people that felt safe and familiar, and that I didn't have to explain too much. I could just trust they knew what to do, Just give them. I mean, Rupam especially, he's like a real brother to me, and I'm a huge fan of his. I mean, I just think he's a pioneer in the guitar. I mean, he's so beyond. It's going to take a while for people to understand what he's doing. I think he's known, but it's like he's at another level. Like I feel like he's pushing the guitar to a place that it's so out there, and the way he's approaching ambient music, it's so conceptual and deep, and he's just the real deal. He's a very beautiful artist. He has a really deep voice, and a lot to say, and he comes at it with such integrity. So I'm grateful to have encountered him and to be forged a friendship with him. We're talking about working on some things together in the future too, like collaborating on some things, because I just want to do things. I just want to work with him on things. I love what he makes.
I think we're going to spend at least the next couple of hours, and we'll only just keep talking about Ascension Codes, because I think that's collectively the amount of time that Animesh and I have spent on the entire album. But I think it's best that we rest it for now and have another chat later. We definitely want to talk about Focus quickly, because next year marks 30 years of Focus. And I saw a picture on social media of you kind of working on it. You talk about earlier about mixing it also. So are there any other plans other than the release of it?
Yeah, pretty much my whole next year is being mapped out, including touring for like 8 months. And
Wow.
it's I don't plan on like doing marathon runs, more just like short runs, come home, short run, come home. But definitely want to get to India and just Southeast Asia, do like the whole globe. I mean, really like play everywhere that we haven't been able to play. And the idea is it's a anniversary and a memorial of sorts, a celebration of life, so it's going to be a very sacred environment, where we're honoring this record and the legacy of the record, but also the legacy of these fallen mates. And so because there wasn't really a proper public way to grieve the loss of these two guys, we didn't have any other than just the announcements. That was it. It kind of just, so I feel like every show is going to be treated as that as well, like a kind of a space to honor their lives. And that's really what's driving this for me in some ways, is I want to honor the history of this album. Obviously, it's a landmark. You know, I can't believe 30 years. It makes me realize how young we were, you know, and what's incredible. And I don't know if Jason had mentioned this, but you know, we videotaped the entire making of that record. We have thousands of hours of footage, and we're working on that as well, which is going to be really cool. It's the like entire making of the album and the journey of, and we're just like children, like crying, yelling at each other in the studio. Like it holds so much space. It's incredible. So that's like, I mean, there's so many plans around the Focus 30th, and it's all being organized and mapped out now. And so that's kind of my whole next year is like really much revolving around that, which is it's partially why I'm playing like a maniac, because I want to just like execute that stuff like how I executed it when I was 20 years old. Do you know what I mean? Like I want to be right there, you know, and it takes, I have to kind of go back into that space of the album and really just merge with it. You know, it's like becoming one with the work again. So yeah, it's happening, and it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff. It's going to be a whole world around the record and the history of it and the guys, you know, really just kind of bringing them forward and honoring their lives and what they did, you know, and this work that they made. And so, yeah, one step at a time. I don't want to reveal too much, but you'll see. Yeah. And the touring will probably start by like April or something, you know. I think that's kind of the plan. Like we're looking at maybe South America then, and then it's just kind of all over the world. And so little by little, things are getting booked and planned, and then it'll all be announced, you know, at some point, like here's the dates, here's the plan. But I'm excited, you know, I feel like I'm prepping for it. And I find myself now thinking about it constantly. Like I'm literally waking up in the middle of the night with ideas. I'm obviously like playing the music and immersed in all of that. And it's like a full circle in a weird way, you know, having Ascension Codes come out and now coming back to the origins. It's like, it's really interesting, you know, it's, I mean, without trying to bring specialness to it, because I don't want to make it a big deal, but, you know, in terms of a human experience, like, and a journey, you know, it's this like,
it is a big deal. Like,
well, you know, it's like, it has that like hero's journey thing of just the full circle and the Ouroboros, you know, going back into the, like you're going back and eating your own tail kind of thing. You start again, you know, and it's, so it has a lot of symbolic archetypal space, and I can feel it psychically occupying a lot of space for me. So you know, I'm just trying to kind of do all of the work around it spiritually, internally, externally, just to kind of embrace, because there's moments, I'll tell you, and I've said this to the manager, where it's like, yes, I want to do this. I want to honor the lives. I want to make this go all the way with this record. I mean, one of the first things when I saw Jason, you know, and I told him, hey, I'm coming to Miami, and we're remixing the record. And then, you know, I saw him a few times. He came out to the studio, and he was like, why are you remixing it? And I said, that was one of his first questions. And I was like, well, first of all, I want to give this record a new, like a facelift in a sense, like give it a new perspective and bring it into like a more, because I feel like as much as I love the 90s mix of the original record, it's like, it's almost bringing it into like a different timeline. You know what I mean? Just kind of pushing it into a different space and kind of it's like a fresh coat of paint or something. Do you know what I mean? On a record that has always existed in this way. And it was, so it's like kind of meeting it again. It's like we start with the mix, you know, and we get to kind of revisit this album. And so it was really like, it was about kind of getting into this work in a very intimate way. And so it was really kind of intense to kind of go and hear those tracks again. Do you know what I mean? And to kind of revisit them but I'll tell you, like in the end, it's incredible what Warren did, because he brought this record into a space sonically that is so, I don't even know how to say it. It's more raw, but more, obviously bigger sounding. The low end is just huge. The bass and the drums are just more forward, but everything is more forward. It's more just like in your face and direct, like more visceral, but also like has this timeless quality. You can't stamp it with like, oh, it's a 90s sound, or it just sounds like it has this like, do you know what I mean? It just sounds like it could be in any time. And that's kind of was the idea, that it's not related to a certain reference point with production techniques. Which the first, Focus, the original, it was very much part of that sound of the Florida scene, the 90s, the way the kick drums, the way the drums were recorded. So now it doesn't have that. It's just kind of in this space of like, it could have come out at any time and you can't date it, And that was the goal, is like, let's just approach this in a way that just feels timeless. And I feel like Warren captured it. It just has this, it feels like the band too. It's very real. It's very kind of like, because that one thing I said to Warren was, you don't have to mess with this record. Like, there's nothing to do. There's nothing to fix. The performances are so on fire, and you hear it. It's the energy of us playing and our tension that we held with each other. You can hear it. It's so raw. It's so intense. And there's don't touch anything. Just bring it forward and EQ it and compress it better. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a very subtle thing to just like, and Warren understood that. It was a delicate space where we're not trying to reinvent this record. You know what I mean? We're not trying to modernize it or hype it up. It's more just like, make it more just real, more in your face, and just capture what happened in 1993, just in a more direct and intense way, where it hits you even harder, And that's what happens. It's just like, oof, it has that like, whoa, like a wall, and so yeah, I'm super excited about it. But what I was getting at was that I kept saying, and I still do this, have these moments once in a while where I say, oh no, I can't do this. I can't, because I'm still actively grieving. And the thought of going up there and playing this stuff without them and in honor of them, just the whole, like, I have to think about, really, this is for the fans. And this is an opportunity for us to do this together. And that's where I get the courage to do this, is I think about others. Because if I get caught up in my own grief process, I withdraw, because I grieve alone. And I want to just be, alone. I want to do this. I just want to work through this in solitude. And I don't think I'm ever going to work through it in a sense of being finished with it. It's like I'm forever changed. Do you know what I mean? Like it's now integrated into my being. The loss of these two lifelong friends in the same year. It's a very watershed kind of experience that changes me on a DNA level, and I can feel it. I'm a different person as a result of these losses. But I also want to be able to show up in an open way without falling apart, because I'm so raw and empathic that I could easily see myself crying every night, which is okay. Maybe that's what needs to happen, to just be, but I do need to execute the stuff too. I got to play my guitar, and I know historically, if I get too emotional, I can't even play, so it's like, that's why I'm like, I've got to get to that point where I'm not thinking about anything anymore in terms of the mechanical, technical aspects of this, so I can just hold the space, and all of this is just not something I'm thinking about. All these crazy riffs, you know what I mean? They're just part of my body.
Yeah.
And it just takes repetition to get to that point, where you aren't thinking about anything technical anymore. It's just all about just being a channel and a conduit for this moment, being able to perform in a pure way.
I'm sure music fans, cynic heads, whatever it is that you want to call that group of people who come to watch this or to come to experience this, you'll have the support that you're looking for, because it's certainly something to look forward to.
Yeah, and the show will be special too.
Mhm.
It's going to be. I don't want to get too far into the details of that, but I really want to make it like a journey. You know what I mean? Where there's an arc to the show that has a beginning, middle, and end, and it's part of the experience of what's happening. Do you know what I mean? Like people can be integrated into it, and so there's a lot of layers to this that are going to be part of the concert. And yeah, we'll see. I'm just excited, and terrified, which is a good sign.
Yeah.
I think you whet everyone's appetite
Yeah,
for like
collectively.
both the live show. But what I want to touch upon is, because I've seen some of the pictures that Jason has put up from like the recording days, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, he put up clips of videos of the recording, and I think as part of a tribute to Sean Reiner.
Mhm.
So I think there's far more. So
Mhm.
I
Oh,
hope
yeah.
there's maybe an accompaniment to.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a film.
Oh, wow.
That's what we're working on, is an actual like documentary.
Wow.
And
Super.
so I don't know when that'll be ready, but my friend who's working on it with us has already kind of gone through all the footage and labeled everything and organized the whole, indexed it basically. So we're kind of, there's a lot of work ahead. It's really kind of, I think, distilling it to the story and just trying to get that, kind of that story to be told and kind of getting that essence. So it's like, and there's what we found, watching it, and my friend Jeremy seeing it a bunch of times now, all the footage is like, he says there's a bunch of stories, and it's trying to kind of see what's the main thread that connects all of those, because there's a lot going on, obviously, because I mean, it's just a lot of footage. And there's the shows before we made the album, and after too, which we have a lot of video of. So there's just a lot of content that has to get kind of woven into this world. But I think people will get a trip out of making the album, because it's such a unique time and space, that you can't ever return to. And this is the beauty of now we're in a world where everything's documented and every child's life is completely, but back then it wasn't as common. So I'm glad that Jason actually had this Hi8 camera, like this big old school camera. And there was these moments where we were all so annoyed by that thing. We were just like, turn that thing off. Like, why do you, now no one even thinks about it. It's like, of course you're filming. But back then we were just like, that's annoying. Turn the camera off,
Yeah, I miss those days sometimes.
Yeah. No, because the thing is, when I met Jason and he talked about it, I think a lot of times what was captured, he was just like going back through it and just got really nostalgic. And it's strange when you think about it, because we were talking like more than 25 years later, sitting in a cafe here in Bombay, but he was immediately transported back to the early 90s of Florida. So like, while we got the audio version of it, and we're definitely going to link in the show notes, I think having a visual accompaniment to that will be far better now.
Yeah, I think it'll be helpful and interesting and nostalgic for people to kind of witness that, to kind of, it's like you open a portal to some other world.
It's like really. A time capsule, basically.
It is total time capsule. Yeah. And so he dropped some of those videos, but there's obviously a lot more from where that came from. A lot more stuff. Yeah.
Thank you once again, Paul, for spending so much time with us.
Thank you, Animesh and Peter. Good to talk to you guys. Yeah.
Yep. hopefully you're in India sometime soon. We'd
Yeah,
love to
stay
host
tuned.
you. And yeah, let's make it happen. Let's
Thank
manifest
you.
that aspect.
Yes.
Listeners, if you're still listening, you guys know what to do. Hornsupod.com, Twitter at Hornsupod, Twitter at Asmoani, Twitter at
Trend
Trend
Crusher.
Crusher. This is Horns Up. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome, guys.